I think, in our discussion, as we know, based on, I think, the presentation we just had, and based on, I think, everybody looking at the space, we could probably be here for 3 hours talking about what's happening in the wallet space, talking about all the dynamics. But I think we'll try to keep it really focused, and I think we have an excellent panel here assembled that I think is across various areas in the ecosystem, and should be able to give you guys some good perspective today. So. First, I think what we'd like to start out doing is just go ahead. I'll introduce myself and the panelists, and then you give a sense of their background, and I think that'll be very relevant as we talk about really different points of view here in the wallet space. So first, just very quickly, my name is Sean Sarkisian, founder and CEO of Cortex MCP, and we're a company really focused on just 3 areas. First, a brand new secure payment method around the tokenization area that we have created that doesn't need a cloud connection, doesn't need a secure element to make a payment, and is fairly unique. Then also focusing on the offers components, as well as carrying your driver's licenses and digital IDs and be able to have those verified. That's enough about me, and there won't be any more. So I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves, spend a few minutes, and then we're just going to dive right into it. So Greg, this is Greg Tennant. I'll let Greg introduce himself.
Hi, Greg Tennant with Cyvera. We're a provider of virtual application network services that enable mobile payments and payments. My background is really in data communications, mobility, and security. So I kind of come at this from a little bit of a more fundamental infrastructure view and the brass tactics of how do you actually facilitate the implementation of this and some of the unique traffic flows that have to occur in the mobility payment world.
Great.
Hi, my name is Will Grayland. I'm the founder and CEO of LoopPay, and I've been in the mobile payment space for about 13 plus years, having founded Roam Data and Way Systems before that, and kind of wandered into the space very naively after I sold my second company, which was a security software company, and thinking in 2001 that I was going to do mobile payments and mobile wallet. And I very quickly learned how hard it is to do mobile wallets, and fortunately was able to pivot and drove towards mobile POS, and ended up doing some cool things. But what we have finally come to the conclusion with at LoopPay is that without the acceptance infrastructure being there, consumers are not going to change their behavior of going away from plastic. It's just too reliable. And if you want to go from plastic to mobile, what we have is a solution that can overcome what's called the 81 principle of mobile acceptance, which means you got to get to at least 80% merchant acceptance before the consumer says, you know what, I'm going to use this device as my primary means of payment. So our biggest question was, how do we address that 80% acceptance? And we invented a solution at LoopPay that allows us to actually transmit a magnetic transmission signal to interact with and transmit payloads to any POS that accepts a magstripe. So that means we can deliver static payload, which is the magstripe data that you already have, or dynamic tokenized payload, which means every transaction is going to be different with a unique cryptogram, and that's what Visa, MasterCards, a lot of issuing banks are going towards. Tokenization is really, truly the next secure solution to deliver basically security beyond physical payment, but also online payment. EMV is really to address the cards. Tokenization is really to address the next generation of mobile payments and ubiquitous payments. So LoopPay invented this solution. We're now live. You can look us up at looppay.com. We've got all kinds of devices. So we're device agnostic. We are merchant agnostic, go across 90+% of merchants accept LoopPay today. And we're card agnostic. In other words, we will be able to accept payment cards, private label, gift cards, loyalty cards, anything that runs through a magstripe, we can store in a secure chip, authenticate, and deliver. So that's the big difference between LoopPay and any other solutions out there. And next year, you're going to see us embedded into all different kinds of devices, including smartphones, not just accessories. So anyway, that's what LoopPay is.
Great. Thank you, Will. Dave?
Thanks. I'm Dave Baldwin, and I am with SoftCard. I'd like to thank Jacqueline for recognizing how difficult our rebrand was. We broke the proverbial land speed record on a rebrand. We did it in under 8 weeks. And actually, my backpack, my daughter literally that's a patch on front of my backpack that my daughter put over the ISIS logo this weekend. So yeah, so thank you, Jacqueline, for recognizing that. I've been in the payments business for almost 18 years. I started off at Hollywood Video. I helped launch their prepaid program. I've worked at payment processors, and then most recently I was with Subway for 6 years, helping to manage the payments infrastructure over at Subway. And I'm currently with SoftCard, and I'm honored to be on this panel and look forward to answering some of your questions about what SoftCard is and
All
where
right.
we are.
Awesome, awesome. So as you can see, we got a great group here. So, I think we'll start it off by saying that, the wallet space, we know it's really a flat-out war that's going on right now. And I think that it's more than just, about payment. It's really about engaging that consumer and keeping that fiduciary relationship and being able to, maintain that from the bank's perspective, to be able to hold on to that consumer, be able to, maintain those depository accounts, not have them ripped away by PayPal, and so on and so forth. But I think that when consumers are queried every time, it still comes up that the primary issue that comes up is security. For whatever reason, well, for a lot of reasons, but I think that it's hard for them to get over that hump. And I think I'll start with you, Dave. If you look at, looking at security being that primary issue, what can our industry do to address that security issue? And also, more importantly, how do we communicate that to customers in a way that they can understand and interpret and feel comfortable about adopting a mobile wallet solution?
Yeah, I think security is at a point where it definitely is top of mind with a lot of consumers, and I think there's some things that are kind of all happening at once, right? So you've heard a lot of talk about EMV. So merchants are going to understand the implications of that, as well as what dynamic, and that's what Will's company does, and what we do as well, is when we transmit a payment, that's dynamic data. So that data would be useless to a fraudster. And so I think what it is it's a combination of, one, making sure that merchants understand that a mobile payment is a different type of payment, or what Will does is a different type of payment that is dynamic and it's inherently secure. So there's one side which is dealing with the merchant side. I think from a consumer side, I think with the the proliferation of NFC terminals in the next, I know Jacqueline had mentioned she sees that as a 5-year curve. We think it's actually going to be a little bit faster. But with the proliferation of NFC, what will happen is consumers will naturally start to understand, here's what my wallet can do, and when I do make a payment with that wallet, it's secure. I mean, some of the things that you have to remind yourself of is when you tap when you make that tap, if I wanted to turn that credential off, I could do it almost instantaneously. You can't pick up the phone and reissue a credit card. I can also reissue a card almost instantaneously as well. And so there's some speed factors as it relates to the mobile wallet, and as well as utility, that once consumers understand that, I think it'll continue to drive adoption.
Yeah,
So.
great. Will?
Security is kind of a cat and mouse game between us and the fraudsters. We're constantly trying to one up them, and they're trying to constantly catch up and one up us. If you go back to the late '60s when Magstripe was first invented, people were going, "Hey, Magstripe is pretty secure. You can't really see the data, and we just make these Magstripe terminals." Well, pretty soon, criminals figured out how to skim cards, how to counterfeit them, and reproduce them. So then the industry goes, well, what do we do next? And how do we make it more secure and make the containers more secure? So then they came up with chip cards. Well, the old model is for the security to be pervasive across, you have to hit just about every point in the ecosystem. Remember that diagram that you saw earlier? If you have to deal with the POS manufacturers, the chip card providers, the merchants themselves, the acquirers, then the networks, then the issuers, you got all of these parties have to play all in the sandbox and everybody adopt. And it's almost like putting ironclad on your boat when the rest of it is wood. And if you got to put one panel on at a time, you're not really safe until you're fully armed. The new model that we see as the better model, because every time you do that and you put the ironclad on, as long as the criminals can attack that and figure out how to solve that, then you're flat for a very long time, because changing the merchant infrastructure, the POS infrastructure takes so long, they get above you, the fraud is, is rampant, then you got to make the next big leap. So you got these step jumps, and it takes a long time to migrate. We're still migrating on EMV today because of that very reason. What if we did it in such a way that the people in between, the POS makers, the acquirers, the merchants, all of the people that are passing and using that transaction is just a pipe to transmit the secure tokens, and you can actually vary the tokens in such a way that they can be delivered, then every time you step up the security, it's between the card issuers and the consumers. And if you want to add another level of authentication or security like biometric or PIN, you add that, the issuers can take it, and everything else between is a pipe. That's the model that we think is the right way to go, make it future-proof.
And I think there's always that pendulum between security and usability, right? We could all give DNA samples at the point of sale, but the gears of commerce are going to come crushing, grinding to a halt. And so you have to kind of always have that in mind in your security model. Greg, from your perspective as well, I mean, what are those issues? You guys are kind of in a different layer than I would say Will and Dave, and maybe seeing it from a different perspective. And what do you guys really see as the core issues that can come to the table to help?
Absolutely. So, when you talk about the consumer confidence to adopt mobility and mobile wallets, that confidence is shaken because, many of the merchants haven't been able to secure their own payment networks. And so, all of the transaction level security that's included in mobile wallet and what we talk about here in the shows is one element. And it's a very, very important element. But it is one level of complexity being layered on an inherently insecure architecture. There is transaction level security, but then there is network level security. And when you look at the fact that, we're all based on largely hub and spoke architectures, and that hub and spoke architecture is over a century old, well, close to a century old. It was never designed to do what we're doing with it today. It was designed to be closed. It was designed to be a hard shell that kept the whole world out, and not to worry about necessarily how granular protections of internal traffic flows. So when you look at the component, what I would recommend highly is that you really look at the architecture that you're rolling out these new things. Kind of as we were just talking about, there is a point of diminishing returns with anything in our industry. And if you try to do too much, you end up getting less out of it. And there's a key striking element there. And when you look at mobile payments is really just a piece part of the whole shopping experience. You're really trying to, go toward the end goals of how do I increase conversion rates, how do I improve loyalty and return shopping. In order to do that, you need multiple different applications to all come together, all right? So the complexity of that into your store, into a limited footprint environment with non-technical resources out at these locations, how do you accomplish that? And do you do it through a variety of discrete implementations that add more complexity to the situation? Probably not the best recipe for approaching it, because complexity equals vulnerability. All right, when you look at the breaches that have happened out there, it is a probability that you're going to be breached. The enterprise network can no longer define where does it begin and where does it end. Does it begin with an employee being phished and downloading malware into the heart of the LAN, or a public IP VPN from a vendor being exploited and providing a beachhead into the heart of your network? Is it a CGI web script flaw on your web that leads to a back-end database? Is it a virus that arises out of your Wi-Fi network? The point is, you can't protect against all breaches. And it is an improbability that you're going to detect it. 99% of all breaches have been identified by a third party, i.e. Visa, MasterCard, the acquirer, looking at the statistical algorithms and detecting anomalies in what's going on and telling that vendor what's going on. Some of these breaches that have happened, there was $1.6 million malware detection systems in the network, and they worked, but they were unable to respond to it due to the complexity of the architecture. The problem is that we are focused on, containment is an afterthought. We are all driving through the rearview mirror when it comes to containment. And the architecture that we're operating on is inherently insecure, and it doesn't even focus on containment. So when a breach occurs in one application, it should never get into the payment network. It should never get into the mobile payment network.
So siloing those off is very critical, is really what we're saying here.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I would say focusing on your underlying core architecture before you try to get too fancy and complex with everything else is fundamentally important to the whole process.
Good, great. No, I think that's a very good point. I think we're going to move to our next question. You know, if you look at wallets in general, I think that a lot of the ones have come out there. There's got to be more to the value proposition, right? If you're going and you're switching a card swipe for a tap, you've traded 4 quarters for $1, right? And you haven't really added a lot of value. And I even heard an industry colleague make a joke that if you take coin and throw it in the garbage, does it make the word clinkle? And I think that basically it was saying that there wasn't a lot of value in these solutions, and at least so far we haven't seen it. So, you know, what do these wallet solutions have to be able to, A, get the consumer more engaged? I mean, Starbucks, let's face it, it's kind of Tinker Toys technology. It's not a lot. It's just flipping around, showing a barcode, but I can track my stars. I can engage. I can do certain things. So I'll start with you, Greg. What, or maybe we'll start with Will. We'll mix it up. What, from your perspective, do you think needs to be added to that wallet solution to really get the consumer to engage, to use it, and also add value to both sides of the chain, merchants and consumers?
So I think there's a foundational value, and then there is ancillary value of what the promise of mobile wallets can do for you. The foundational value, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is how do I get to replace all of my plastic cards to have it work on here? In other words, having this be a container that that I can go out without carrying another, bulky plastic wallet. And how do I make it more secure? Security, everybody, wants to make sure that if I lose my phone, I don't lose my life, and that people don't easily hack into it. But the foundational piece of being a wallet, when you call yourself a wallet, you got to, at least do what my physical wallet does before you start telling me about loyalty and coupons and all of these fancy new things. So we haven't achieved that as an industry yet, not until we solve the fundamental problems of ubiquitous acceptance. When you have ubiquitous acceptance, then you're able to change the consumer behavior. And Loop Pay today is probably the only wallet solution that actually has users using their mobile devices as their primary means of payment. And I'm one of those users, because I was early. I've done probably over 2,700 transactions now over the last 18 months at over 2,000 merchants in 12 different countries. And what I found is that I have literally ditched my wallet. Now, I still carry around plastic because, my driver's license is still needed, and I have a backup card needed for ATMs or for, gas stations every once in a while.
What do we say about props, Will? That's excessive usage. Come on.
But this is my phone. But it also happens to be my my wallet. But the reality is, in order to get to me as a consumer saying this is my mobile wallet, I have to actually cross over that barrier to be able to use this on a day-to-day basis reliably. Then, from there, it's about how do I get my card issuers to provide me with more information? How do I get those cards, loyalty cards, my private label cards, to give me deals, offers that are relevant to me if I opt in? If I want to be totally anonymous and say, don't bother me, I should be able to block everybody out.
Yeah.
So those ancillary applications like, deals near me, offers near me, and being able to go into a store, and if the store wants to offer me something and I'm open to that, why can't I have one click of a button to accept their store card without filling out this long form and holding up the line and things of that nature? So these are the things that I think will come, but to transform me to my new digital wallet, I need to have the basic functions first. Get my cards in there, work everywhere, work with my phone.
So the underpinnings and the compliance or capability to work with the technology will also help drive these value-added services to
Absolutely.
be effective.
That's
Gotcha.
the foundation.
Gotcha. Dave, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's all about utility. I mean, it's simply utility. So for some folks, it's going to be speed. Tapping is faster. For other folks, it's going to be, things like the user experience is simpler and they like it. For others, it's going to be about offers and coupons. Payments for this is just simply a starting point. There's all of this sort of native technology that exists on these phones, and everyone has to remember we're at this is mile one, right, of a long marathon, which means that as NFC starts to propagate, as these things become more ubiquitous and more people have them, Once people start to leverage some of this technology, that's where you're going to really see the innovation. The payments piece is just simply payment. It's going to be about offers, coupons, commerce, and what someone I've heard say this before, it's sort of this notion of brand in the hand, right? Which is that brand experience can be replicated on somebody's phone, and they're interacting with your brand, in some instances all the time, and that's where the promise is.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I mean, merely being able to leave that leather at home, carry all those things with you, but also be, as you said, engaging in a lot of different ways. Greg, your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to both user functionality, as we were talking about, that utility of what you're trying to accomplish, and also availability. So where can it be used? And those two have to come really hand in hand. And, there are natural product life cycle components, and there's always the early adopters, the people that are driven by the technology and the efficiency and the ease of use, and that is absolutely critical, and that's going to drive them. But as you get to more of a mass adoption, it's got to be broader utility. These have to do more for somebody. There's a certain segment of the population that mobile payment, great. You know what? I like my card. Look at checks we were talking about this yesterday. Checks and even fax machines. People hold on to old technology for a long time. It's hard. They go kicking and screaming into new things. So you have to find multiple ways to draw them in and increase the functionality of the wallet so that it solves more aspects to them than just a payment. And that then gets into the whole implementation side of it. So how is this going to get out there? Today there are really largely two methods of payment out there. There's in-store, go swipe your card, take the goods locally, or a web-based transaction like an AWS model where you do it online as a offline or card not present transaction, and they ship it to you centrally. But how are you going to now allow somebody who's offline, a connected consumer who's out in his lawn working and he ran out of mulch and he wants to go down to Home Depot to go get it, he wants to order it so it's waiting for him, to be able to go do that locally from the store? Well, that's a hard thing to do today because that local store doesn't get settlement of that to cover the cost of the inventory going out. And so you have to increase this functionality on both ends of this equation, the user and the availability at the merchant location. And so you have to think about these. These are polarly opposite traffic flows from the way the traditional payments are done today. And so you have to think about this in a broader dynamic of how am I going to enable functionality? And how am I going to do this without creating more problems for myself? And then how do I add more functionality for the customer so I can have more reasons why they'd want to adopt this?
Yeah, no, and I agree. And then I think to a large extent the lines are blurring between card present and card not present. I mean, I walk around, I do a transaction on my mobile device. What was that mobile? Was that e-commerce? Right. Was that this? Was that that? And particularly if I'm in store, do I want to have all these different scenarios of having to be connected? What if I don't have a cloud connection? I'm not going to pay the merchant? They don't care if you pay them in blood, clams, IOUs, right? You give them some tender, you go out the door, and there's not a lot of issues there. So I think I agree with actually what everybody said here.
Yeah, I'd add one thing to that, which is sort of the operational component to it, right? Which is, and I think that's the thing that gets missed a lot in this, is what fundamentally changes at a location, right? So if you're going to do, ordering in advance and then you go to that location, well, you fundamentally change the way that they traditionally do business.
Exactly.
So in Jacqueline's sandwich store, if I could order in advance and then show up, well, guess what? That changes how she does business. And so I think there has to be, as people are contemplating these things, yes, they're great. They can be like Uber-like disruptive, like, hey, guess what? I can just walk into my hotel room. But you have to balance that with what the operational complexities are and perhaps what you're introducing into the system. So.
Yeah, I think there was a great video from a lot of friends at PayPal where PayPal showed this ubiquitous checkout scenario. And everybody's walking in, and the lady grabs her phone, and she smiles and walks out the door. Well, what they didn't see is the security guard tackle her for shoplifting, right? 2 minutes later. I mean, you have to think about these real-world scenarios where we're integrating wallets. So,
yeah, just adding on to that, I mean, if we were to boil it down to two words, it's just consumer experience.
That's right.
What is that commerce experience?
Exactly.
I mean, payments is a component of it, and in the next generation, we will have mobile payments in a much more ubiquitous way.
Yes.
But it's the experience that each merchant has to focus on to deliver to their consumers. That's what is going to matter. Uber's a great experience, but payment side, there's nothing new on the payment side. It's just a card on file. For us, what we're talking about is how do we innovate and deliver a better consumer experience when you have supercomputers in your hands rather than swiping with plastic, rather than shopping the same old way, getting coupons in ways that you hardly check and offers in a way that's not relevant to you. How do you improve that experience? That's what we got to drive
Yeah,
towards.
yeah, I agree. And also really thinking about the lowest common denominator in the experience, right? Really think about what that consumer is going to do and the spectrum of consumers that are going to use it, right? We're not all early tech adopters. I'm the dork with the Moto 360, right? But not everybody's me. And so, yeah, you have to think about that. I think those are all great points, guys. I think we're going to move on to one other topic that I think is relevant. And if you look at our payment industry, right, we are one, for all of us that have been in it a long time, that's really fraught with co-opetition, right? Everybody kind of collaborates yet competes at the same time. We want to say that PayPal hates Visa. Yeah, that's fine, but PayPal cannot exist without Visa and ACH for the time being, right? And so what trends are you guys seeing as it relates to the wallet with all the individuals in the value chain that may be able to, really affect how are those alliances going to form, right? Because people can say that Apple Pay was a function of them just lining up with the traditional processors, and now the battle lines have been drawn. But I still think there's some gray area in there that we can look at. So, what are your guys' perspectives there? And, Dave, I'll start with you. I would love to hear kind of what your point of view is.
I guess it's, for us, it's about, consumer choice. And so if what we provide to the market, if we're going to characterize ourselves as an open platform, which we do, if consumers want a PayPal credential to exist inside of a soft card wallet, then that's something that we need to look into. And so for us, we believe it's going to be consumer driven on top of the utility that we provide with offers, coupons, and others. So I think these discussions are occurring across the board. So discussions that we have with the networks, right? This is a complex ecosystem. We're having discussions with the networks. We're having discussions with our competitors. And we're sort of collectively coming up with, hey, what do you do really well? Well, what we do really well is put credentials inside of a phone, leveraging NFC. Well, great. If that's the case, why couldn't we have a currency credential inside of our wallet? Of course we could. And so I think these natural alliances and discussions are going to occur when people focus on what their strengths are and then how they can sort of benefit each other, and it does become a sort of mutual thing. I think the blurring of those lines is going to even get, where it would just, your head would pop off. Like, there's no way they should be talking to each other. And
Exactly.
sure enough, I guarantee you those discussions are happening.
Exactly. Will?
Well, this is the classic ecosystem play. I mean, this cannot happen without the ecosystem and enough players within the ecosystem, whether you're talking about the networks, the issuers, the merchants, the operators, carriers, and handset makers, and POS makers. There's so many players that are in the ecosystem, and if one player tries to dominate, it starts to lose momentum as an ecosystem play. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm glad to see you guys reaching out, despite the fact that you're carrier centric, and the early days of the soft card side was more, hey, this is our territory.
Absolutely.
And that's very hard, as you guys can
Absolutely.
find out. And if one issuer does it, it's hard to scale. If one merchant does it, it's hard to scale. And merchants can't do it, including currency, without really playing with the other folks in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So we see this as a platform. I mean, for us, a lot of our customers and partners sees us as a platform. Yes, we took a small investment from Visa, but they said, look, you're an ecosystem play, go and play with all of the other networks, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. We're not trying to limit you. We took an investment from Synchrony Financials. They're a private label card, completely different from Visa, but they're also issuing Visa and open loop cards. And handset makers are looking at us. As long as we try to keep agnostic and stick to the principle of the consumer experience is what wins, and how do we bring the best consumer experience so that it's across merchants, across cards, across devices, across borders, then you have a chance of making a difference.
Yeah, great.
Rather than fighting, within each other.
Excellent. Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the laws of markets hold just as much to mobile payments as they do any other market that we've seen evolve over time. And it's a very, very complex market. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people who are trying to position to maintain relevance, and there's people who are trying to position to take that relevance away from them. But at the end of the day, it's all driven by the solution for the target customer that you're going after and what you're trying to achieve. And out of that, natural, components will, partnerships and co-opetition will evolve. And it's because, we all do something special. We all do a piece part of what's out there. The key is you got to know who's your competition, all right? Who really is my competition? Not just general, okay? They provide payments, so they're a competition. There's some very specific subtleties, nuances in how you're going to go about delivering a solution to market. I mean, if anybody could have come to market and tried to do it themselves, Apple could have done it. But Apple decided to respect the integrity of the existing system and create its own establishment beachhead versus going out and trying to do it itself and bypassing the entire payment system. There's a lot of good reasons for that. They could have completely fragmented the back-end settlement process. They would have gotten the whole industry going against them. Instead, they eased their way in. Now, whether they stay that way throughout time and they decide to, bypass it at some point in time, we'll see. But, the base point is, the co-opetition is going to have to drive because the end solution to the customer is complex, but that's what's going to pay for everything.
Yeah.
And it'll evolve that way.
No, I think those are good points. And at the same time, we do want to collaborate, but at the same time, I think we need to have all of our heads on a swivel,
Yes.
right? Because Apple's in a position to, let's be honest, disintermediate the banks if at some point they so choose, right? So just be wary of your partners, tread lightly, but don't be hesitant to go into those discussions. All right, great. I think we're going to go quickly through this last question. I want to leave enough time for Q&A here from the audience. But I know that we have a lot of merchants and we have people in the payment space here, right? And so, what can we tell merchants specifically? I guess maybe if there's one number one issue, just one issue from all of you, what is the number one thing merchants should be looking at when they're thinking about adopting a mobile wallet solution? Almost have it in one word and then support that word. Maybe a hard question for all of us. I'll start with you, Greg. What is the one thing merchants should really care about here?
Well, I mean, I have a clear bias on this, but it's security. That factor to anybody is going to be probably the single biggest, impediment for them adoption of this. You can create all the utility in the world, but if at the end of the day they don't feel secure, they're not going to do it. And so security is the bottom line aspect of this. And, as I first said, security is not just about the transaction level, security elements. I mean, at Black Hat 2014, they were on the show floor showing how EMV systems are being hacked and how they can be hacked and how you can, take the data from the EMV and then use it on the magstripe side of that exact same system to emulate the transaction and the card data that was, skimmed off of the EMV side of it. NFC was demonstrated in 2013 at the Black Hat show. And, 50 of the top hackers out there fell prey to it. So the point is tokenization has been hacked. You can, Google on the internet and see university papers on exactly how tokenization can be hacked. So the point is it all has to be taken into account. And all of this ties into not just payments, but it ties into big data. All right, and big data is where the consumer really has the biggest risk. Today if they have a payment, a false payment on their statement, they can call their bank, they can get it taken care of. Identity theft is a whole nother world. And if you think about identity theft at a mass level, if you think the payment is a newsworthy item, just think about, okay, we've now given away the core to our customers' identity. And that has a much greater impact, a much more profound impact, not only on the merchant, but on the economy in general. So security is at the heart and the underpinning of everything that we're doing, and it can't be taken lightly, and it can't be seen as just a transaction level issue.
Correct. Will?
2 words.
You get one. A hybrid word is fine. A hyphen is just acceptable.
Acceptance is one, and openness is the other one, for merchants particularly. Acceptance is what drives consumer behavior change. Without acceptance, they're just going to go stay with where they are. And I'm talking about acceptance not only across merchants to be able to make that behavior change, but also across cards. This is not just about your Visa, MasterCard. This is about your private label, your loyalty cards, your gift cards, all of these cards. We have different cards in our wallet. In fact, we would have more if our wallet was, able to be thin enough. And so having the ability to change consumer behavior first is critical to talk about playing at the next level, right? Once you're able to play at the next level, the second word of openness becomes important. Openness meaning, can the merchant leverage this platform to influence the consumer? Can they have a spot inside of that application? Can they influence how a consumer buys, what they use to pay, And if they can, then they're at a level playing field where they can compete with each other. They can send the right offers with the relevant details and provide that experience that we talked about for the consumers that are so important for you to influence that consumer. And if you want to lower interchange and lower cost, it's those ability to influence consumer spend and tender type that allows you to control cost. Of course, you got to have security also. So I back that up with the security, but acceptance and openness is, to me, the key.
So I'm gonna do 4.
Oh, my
instead of
God, you
one.
guys, we got 15 minutes, come on.
Now, so security, obviously, if you're a merchant, it has to be a secure solution. That's that's foundational in this, right? The second piece is choice. Consumers have to have choice. It can't be forced upon them. The consumers will drive what is in that wallet. The other thing is privacy, right? Which means that relationship is not between the wallet or the producer of the wallet and the consumer. That relationship is between the merchant and the consumer. And whatever wallet you have has to respect that. Yeah. And then the last piece I would say is simplicity.
Yeah.
It just has to be simple. If it's not simple, then if it's complex, it's not worth doing. It needs to be
So
simple.
checking in, having a picture of my face on the tablet, walking up, entering 4 special codes, then getting my coffee? That's not
I'm
seamless?
just saying it has to be simple.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I wanted to leave enough time here for Q&A with the audience. So if there's any questions, happy to take them now.
I mean, merchants generally don't want to change. They're focused on doing their business, whether it's running a restaurant, running a retail shop, whatever it is. Getting them to change their POS, their IT infrastructure, their systems, training their clerks that turn over that's measured in weeks, not even months sometimes. This is a very tough problem. They have enough to deal with on their own. So getting them to change a POS without proven benefits is very, very hard. And everybody has different POS systems. So from a merchant perspective, I mean, even this EMV migration, and people were going to be, kicking and screaming, throughout this whole process. So when you're talking about, unless you can get them to make that change, you're not going to get to ubiquitous acceptance, as we talked about earlier. So I would say merchants are resistant to spending the money, making the change, and they're also fearful, as you know, with the MCX currency project, they're fearful that if you change to a particular standard, which is the beef with NFC today,
Agreed.
and that only MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and the brands are able to run on those NFC rails, now you're cutting out my Target Red card, you're cutting out my Macy's card, you're talking about my Walmart card, so my gift cards, my loyalty cards, what about those, right?
Yeah.
So merchants today don't have a very big incentive. And if you can give them a payment solution that doesn't require them to do any change and save them money, I mean, that's a big win.
I think that to some extent, I want to hear Dave's perspective on this too, because NFC allows you clearly to do more than just pass track data. You could pass other things over the NFC channel. And, how have you guys at SoftCard been able to address that same issue that merchants have said, oh, I don't want to turn on NFC? Well, a lot of times it's not implementing NFC, it's flipping a switch and just turning on what you already have, because NFC is embedded in a lot of terminals. But what's your perspective?
And I think the challenge is, well, what is the promise of NFC? And it hasn't necessarily manifested itself above and beyond payments.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where merchants are hesitant. I mean, we are doing offers today. We're doing offers today with all of our partners. We're doing issuer-based offers that don't require changes at the merchant point of sale. We're doing merchant-specific offers.
Yeah.
I think that's where the promise is.
Yeah.
And in that instance, it's not a matter of, which levers do I need to turn on? Do I need to turn on the EMV? Do I need to turn on NFC? I think once that promise starts to manifest itself a little bit better in the marketplace, that's when you'll start to see that sort of wave and that momentum change.
Yeah.
But to date, it hasn't done that.
Sure.
Yeah,
So there is work to do. I think there's
Just,
definitely work to do.
just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the focus should be on transmission means, because NFC is a
Right.
transmission means. MST, magnetic secure transmission, is a transmission means. Bluetooth is a transmission means. Let's not get caught up on, transmission means. That's irrelevant. You got to use a transmission mean that works And for us, we're looking at adding multi-modes and adding NFC and leveraging HCE and leveraging NFC for things like transit and
right.
other ancillary applications and including payments. To us, as long as the merchants accept it, this is to your point, as long as they already accept it and we can deliver that value, then that's fantastic. And we don't care what transmission means it is.
That's right.
That's a good point. Any other questions from our perspective? And so the question was, if you look at card present and card not present, how are those fees going to adjust over time, and what's that going to look like? I think if you look at the new tokenization standards that have come out from Visa, MasterCard, and everybody, one thing to consider in there is they have what's called a token assurance score, a reliability score that's 0 to 100, okay? And I think if we're going to be pragmatic with ourselves, that's a phantom way for the card networks to say, hey, we now have a interchange grid of 0 to 100. Your token's not good enough, that's getting a mega high interchange. This one's not, that's getting... So I think you're going to hear the words card present and card not present eventually disappear.
Yeah.
And they'll be replaced by what is the quality of that payment method and how secure is it? And how do they, I don't dislike the card networks. I think they serve a very effective purpose. But this is a way for them to maintain their current business model and their kingdom to give you different interchange rates, right? I mean, that's really, from our perspective, as kind of a token supplier, what we see. But you guys have any other opinions here, too?
Yeah, so a soft card transaction, just to be clear, is a card-present transaction today. How that changes in the future, I think you're right. I think there are going to be significant changes, and I think the dynamics of the strength of the token or the strength of your solution will be how it, I agree with you. I think that is how it's going to shake out.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, to date, our mobile wallet solution is a card-present transaction.
Yeah, and card present, you're presenting track data. They see the full track data, and it meets the specs, and, we'll...
Yeah, the term is actually authentication, because you have two-factor authentication. You have, something that you have with your track that's presented. But the term that people are starting to go towards is called mobile authenticated transaction. So mobile authenticated transaction, as opposed to card present, card not present, there are still multiple means of mobile authenticated transaction, which means you could use a PIN, you could use biometrics, your fingerprint can be another factor of authentication. And if these things add to and location is also another factor of authentication. If these things add to the certainty that it is Will Graylin on the other side making the transaction, then the network, based on that, will look at how to assign, a more, I guess, fair, if you want to use that word, fair.
Define fair.
Fair interchange.
Sure,
rate, right?
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
But at the same time, you still got card issuers that are looking at it as. Card issuers are still looking at it as, well, what other choice do you have? Especially when you're talking about online transaction, card issuers' point of view is, well, hell, you can't use cash online. You have to use our cards. So therefore, the card not present rate is really just another way for us to say, that's our toll.
What about PayPal?
To charge. Well, I mean, PayPal's clearly got their toll too.
Exactly. Greg, any comments here as well?
Not specifically on what's going to happen with the rates. I mean, I think what you do see is, the implementations with EMV, people are trying to, implement debit as the preferred approach versus credit, because they'll be able to arbitrage a better rate from how they're doing it, and that over lots of transactions adds up. And I think you're going to see that in a lot of ways, and at some point, it's going to come to the point where they're going to have to look at it and say exactly what Will said. This is about the authentication. How can you validate the authenticity of what's going on? And if that is the underlying pin for the rate, which is the exposure and the covering of the liability of fraud and theft, then how do we mitigate that? And you can't charge me that amount if I can authenticate that this is an accurate, valid transaction.
Yeah, and I think that if we were going to give any guidance, that if all the FIs should be prepared, if they're not going to use one of Visa's or those individual services to back up the quality of what they're doing with almost, you have to present your case, right? And it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Very early stages for that whole process, but it should be interesting over time. Any other questions? Well, great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to the panelists as well. It was a great panel, and look forward to a great conference.